Welcome back to another School Psych Finds podcast episode. Today we have an awesome guest, the creator behind those hilarious memes you see from School Psych Memes. Listen in to hear us talk about all things school psychology, including their journey behind the School Psych Memes account, all things school psychology, life as a school psychologist, ADHD, SLD, testing, and so much more. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about School Psych Memes. You can give us like a quick overview and then we'll get into some more fun questions later on in the episode.
I obviously am a school psychologist. I've been practicing for 12 years now. So 12 years goes by really fast. I started School Psych Memes back in, I want to say February of 2020, right before the pandemic hit. And so that was really the thing that drove me to put some effort into it and start making memes. I had some downtime, obviously, and it was a different world we were living in. So I really just made that part of my day, was making memes and posting them, and it really took off. So that's really where the meme page came from.
I think that's a great time to have started this page because a lot of people were just home and like really needed that humor and like relief during that time. When you started it, did you ever anticipate that it was going to get to the level that it's at now with your following?
No, absolutely not. In fact, it was more just an outlet for me because I think my friends were probably getting annoyed with the amount of memes I was sending them. And I have a friend who, if you want to follow her, it's just school psychology is her tagline for her Instagram account. She had started posting just random school psychology related information on her account. And I saw that and thought, hey, that's something that I could do too. And I really didn't know much about Instagram up till that point. So it's been a learning process for sure.
Yeah, now you're an Instagram pro.
I wouldn't say that, but I try.
And so what inspired you to kind of blend school psychology and humor?
That's a really good question. I think there's a lot of things that went into that. I think first and foremost, like I said, it's an outlet. I always use humor as an outlet. That's kind of my go-to when things are challenging or life is awkward, whatever it may be, especially on the job. I find relief by finding the humor in situations. So I found that memes were a really good way to express that. And so that's really when I started putting effort into the creative process there with the memes. And I just found out it was something that came really easy to me too. I'm sure you were probably going to ask this later, but I have ADHD myself. I'm very vocal about that. And I like to make sure people know because it certainly comes with a lot of quirks. But one of the strengths of that too is I make connections and associations really easily. And so I think that's one reason when it comes to making memes, it's something that it just happens. I don't even have to think about it. It's like a random thought pops in my head and I make an association and boom, there's a meme.
Well, that's something I've noticed in talking to you kind of more behind the scenes is you're funny outside of school psychology content too. So that's something I think people would be interested in knowing. Like, do you use humor outside of your meme account often as well? Like, is that something your coworkers maybe like know about you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think to the point where half the time it's eye rolls, but I really don't care. It's just the way that I express myself. And I know they love it. So I keep doing it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I know I always love having someone funny around, especially in our profession, because it can get pretty like routine and cold or stressful and contentious. And it's nice to have someone just break the ice and make us kind of get back to our humanity and realize, okay, we all know what we're doing, especially in those difficult meetings, like, or after them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so you said you've been a psychologist for, was it 12 years?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, have you always worked in the state you're in? Tell us like what state you're in right now too.
So I'm in Illinois right now. I'm in the Chicago suburbs. I've been here the full 12 years, although if you want a little more background information, I did grow up in Michigan, so I moved out here for grad school, Loyola alumni, very proud of that. And that's where I've been ever since.
Nice. And do you like working there?
I do. I remember after grad school, I kind of had to make that choice of do I stick around here? Do I go back to my hometown? Do I look for somewhere else in the country? And I just really enjoyed what I had going here in Illinois. And I found like the opportunities I had and the social connections I had made were really important to me too. So I stuck around.
It's crazy how different being a school psychologist is in a bunch of different states across the country, but it's nice. It sounds like you got to go to grad school in the state you're practicing in. So you kind of learned about your state's policies then.
Yeah, and it's funny because there really is some differences between the states and depending on where you practice, whether that be how you identify specific learning disabilities, timelines can be different. I know here in Illinois, we have 60-day timelines to complete evaluations and write IEPs should they qualify. And I just found out recently in Michigan that I guess they have 30 days to complete the same amount. So I was really awestruck by that. I barely can keep up with the 60-day thing here in Illinois. And
You're like, I made a good decision, Cody.
oh, I know. So props to you, Michigan psychs out there.
And what type of setting are you working in right now? And have you worked in other settings before?
Yes. So for the past 10 years, I've been in just pre-K through 8th grade, although I work in 2 elementary schools, so kindergarten through 5th grade.
Okay. And has that primarily been your experience during your work as a school psychologist?
Yeah, for the most part. For the first 2 years, I worked at a therapeutic day school. I did one of the behavior programs there, provided a lot of counseling, reevaluations, and that was kindergarten through 8th grade.
Okay. Do you enjoy then? Would you call yourself like an elementary school psych? You prefer the little ones, or you just haven't ventured out to high school, middle school? Well, I guess you did middle school.
Yeah, I've had experience all across the board pretty much, and I really do love elementary where I'm at right now. I really enjoy kind of being the quote unquote first on the scene when it comes to evaluations and that problem solving process and trying to figure things out and be a detective. Not that older grades you wouldn't have to do that as well, but I do like the little kids. But I'll say I get really curious sometimes about what it would be like to be, say, a high school psych, and make that shift. I know our friend Educationally Psyched is Priyana's making the big switch soon, so we all got high hopes for her.
Yeah. Oh, I think, that's one of the coolest things about being a school psychologist is even though some parts might get monotonous and like routine, there's always opportunity for change. And like every day is different and every experience is different. Even if you just switch like to another elementary school, but then you can switch even across settings.
Right.
I've been a high school psych. I love it, but you do kind of see like different personalities like leaning towards different settings. But I think no matter what, we all love kids and we're in it to help them. So I think we're going to love it no matter what setting we're in.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you a question, and you don't have to answer it if you think it's a weird question, okay? But I wonder, do you think that people realize that School Psych Memes is run by a male school psychologist? And I only ask that because there's not a lot of male school psychologists compared to female.
No, I think it's funny you ask that because that's something that I'm very much aware of, and I'll see comments left and whatnot, just kind of casually referring to me as her, and that's fine. I don't care. And I get it because I one of the things about School Psych Memes is I do recognize my audience, and the stats for my followers are over 90% women. So, I'm aware of that, and I know that that's something that people probably don't think about.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so kind of along that line, tell us a little bit about your experience as being a male school psychologist. Like, is that something that has like stood out to you, maybe like in grad school, or is it not something that's ever kind of made a difference one way or another?
I mean, honestly, it's something that just in the day-to-day course of my career, I'm not thinking about. Even just working in an elementary school, it's mostly women that you're working with, and I'm very used to that. I'm very comfortable with it, and it's honestly not something I even think about. In fact, just the other night, I went out for our social worker had a birthday party, so we went down. Actually went live for about 30 seconds, I think.
I must have missed it. Dang it.
But it was basically girls' night, and I was the guy. So, again, it's not something I was thinking about. I just like going out and having a good time, and they're good friends. So
yeah, and I don't think obviously it should have to make a difference. I think that it's actually I want to see more male school psychologists coming into the field because I think it's good to have different perspectives and for them to also see that like, oh, it's not just women in education. Like there's also men.
Yeah. And that's interesting because I remember learning that school psychology used to be a male dominated profession and that it switched the other way.
I know. Did like complete 180.
Yeah. But again, I think it's always good to have some representation and to keep some balance. So
yeah. So if you weren't a school psychologist, what do you think you'd do? I think you'd be a comedian. But I don't know if that's what you had in mind for yourself.
Oh God, I'm way too self-critical to be a comedian. That would be hard. I actually started when I went to college. I was initially studying music. Music's always been a big part of my life. I play drums, I play piano, little guitar. It's been a while, but I really enjoy music. I enjoy playing music. I enjoy every single genre of music. So I think if I wasn't being a school psychologist and if money wasn't an issue, it would be a musician or like a composer. So someone that I really like film scores and people that compose music for films or TV shows and whatnot. So I think that might be.
Actually, remember you saying that like way back when I was starting my podcast. I think we were talking and you
Yeah.
said like you're really into music and like you know a lot of cool songs and stuff like that. That actually makes a lot of sense to me, not to like put you in a box, but you know, it sounds like you're a creative person.
Yes.
You like creating things, music, memes, humor.
Right. Definitely.
All that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier you have ADHD. I wanted to ask you how you find the time and organization to like manage running this big school psych memes account and working as a school psychologist, because as school psychologists or people in education, we know how stressful the school year is and how little time you feel like you have for anything, even like to take care of yourself.
Well, the short answer is I don't. I don't. I I don't find the time to manage it really. It's one of those things where I see it as a hobby, and certainly my job comes first. So it's not like I'm putting off. Well, that's a lie. I might procrastinate by making memes, but at the end of the day, obviously my job comes first. But when it comes to, I don't know, running the site, I I just try to pace myself. I try to think about, how much effort do I want to put into it? How much time do I have to put into it? And then I kind of go from there. I feel bad because I get so many messages and there's so many just opportunities for interaction on the site. And I'm not really good at that. It's so hard for me to keep up with everything. So that's one thing that I do struggle with. But, as far as running the site, I think the hardest thing is just keeping new content coming. In the first year or two, I felt like things came pretty easily. But, in the last year, it's been a little bit more of a struggle.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would guess that almost every creator, social media, like memes generator, you feel like, oh, okay, it's been a few years. I've covered a lot of these topics. But what I've noticed is you're gaining new followers as the days, months, years go by. But also, people aren't shown all of your content. I might post something, go over a whole topic in depth, but 2 months later, there's half of my followers have never even seen that because it didn't come up on their page or they weren't on Instagram when I posted it. We know our content and it feels strange to reproduce it in other ways, but so many people haven't seen it.
No, you're absolutely right. And I have to thank you for helping me, kind of pushing me to do more of that. There's a part of me that feels guilty when you're not creating new content continuously and you're kind of reaching down to the bottom and pulling up stuff that's old. But you're absolutely right. You have people that are new that haven't seen it before, or things haven't been around for a while, and people enjoy seeing it again. So that's been helpful.
Well, and I think that's the great thing about school psych memes is memes stay funny. So like if you post a meme that you posted a year ago, like it's that season again, like I'm still gonna laugh at that. I'm still gonna enjoy seeing that. I think we kind of get self-critical of ourselves and we're like, oh, I already posted that. Are my followers going to be like, why are they posting that again?
Right. Yeah. There are certain memes that I do like to post, on, like, for instance, there's one I think for Teacher Appreciation Week. And then the same one works well for National School Psychology Week. So I make sure I post that about twice a year. And then, of course, there's the holiday themed ones and all the ones that are pertinent to the season. So I always dig those up.
Where do you get your inspiration for your memes? Is it from your personal experiences, things you've heard? Like, where does that come from?
It really is a lot of just everything. It's hard to pinpoint that because I might be watching a movie and I'll see a clip from the movie and I'll be like, oh, that's a lot like this thing that I've been struggling with at work. I could make a meme out of that. Or I'll look through memes that are already created that might have to do with a different profession, but are certainly relatable. And I might re-engineer those to be school psychology related. So it really comes from lots of different places.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're, like I said, good at creating things and also good at making connections. So like one idea sparks another and then in that creative process. I'm not as creative as you, but then you like come up with these memes. You make really funny memes.
You make some good ones too.
People really like your page.
You've got some good ones.
Thank you. All right. So back to really quickly, let's loop back to the ADHD thing. In terms of managing both, you feel like it's hard. Is it easier in the summer, or is summer like, okay, now you're kind of like trying to relax from the chaos of the school year?
I don't know. It's almost a little harder during the summer sometimes, because even though I have more free time, there's less, you're thinking about your job less. And so it's not at the forefront of your mind. And one thing with ADHD is if it's not right in front of me, I'm probably not thinking about it. So unless I'm keeping something in front of me or I'm experiencing things on the job, that makes it a lot easier, certainly. So that can be one of the challenges of summer. And plus, I feel like the following kind of drops off a little bit during the summer too, because people are out doing things at different times of day. So there's that to consider as well.
You know, I totally relate to that. That makes perfect sense. And it goes back to like the connections and like what's sparking you to like create that content. Something that happened at work or something you saw. Yeah. And you're right. People aren't really as active in the summer. So it's kind of a conundrum, right? It's like during the school year, you feel like I don't have time to make all this great content. I wish I had free time to make all this free content. Then you get the free time and you're like, oh, I'm not getting inspired.
Yep.
And it's like
never ending struggle.
Yeah. But you make it work because you enjoy doing it, right? So that's another thing I wanted to talk about. What's something that you think people don't realize about running a school psychology Instagram page?
I do get messages from followers that will say things like the humor really helps them just get through the job. You know, they're having a tough week. And to me, I just feel really grateful that I can use something that comes naturally and I enjoy, but also helps others. I think that's one thing that I get a lot of motivation from too, is just thinking about like, oh, this is helping other people too. And that at the end of the day is really something that helps keep me going. So I really appreciate my followers, really. It is, and it does feel like a community too, because you know, when you're a school psychologist, you're often on your own island and you don't often get a chance to interact with other people that do what you do and understand things the way that you do. And I think that's another reason that the page has been successful, is because it kind of became a point where people could see like, oh yeah, that's something that I experienced too. And that's something I learned early on, was just that I could post a meme that was school psychology related and it would be about the most obscure thing. And hundreds of people would be like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. Like that's, I totally get it, you know, things like that. So that's really motivating.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that you're creating that content. Humor is like so important, so helpful to have, and it's fun, and it's like ways to build connections. And I agree with you on the community piece as well. Like, even though you have the people you went to grad school with, like that's a really small circle. A lot of us went in different directions. And then usually you're the only school psychologist in a school, or maybe like one of two, right? So this online world has really allowed us to feel more connected and less isolated. And I think it's so valuable to feel that way, because I feel like you feel more burnt out if you don't feel connected and you don't feel like other people understand what you're going through.
Right, absolutely.
So we talked about the benefits of running the school psych memes page. What are some of the maybe challenges? Like, do you get hater comments? Do you get negative comments? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's something that anyone who's running a public social media page has to deal with at some point. Is you're going to get people that are angry for whatever reason, or they hate you for whatever reason. And I have to say, it's been for the most part a really peaceful, safe place, I think, for school psychs. But, you know, obviously we do get the occasional person that comes in who's got some kind of agenda, and they don't like the humor and they think the humor is insensitive and whatnot, you know, and that's certainly something that I think about. I don't want to be insensitive about things. And I certainly do criticize myself and reflect and try to think, okay, what's the benefit of this? Because you do have to be careful. But at the same time, when it comes to, I think, that kind of like the negative comments and the haters and whatnot, the number one strategy is to ignore it. And that works all the time. It's been really successful. You know, honestly, I see it And I figure if the followers want to jump on it, they can. But otherwise, I just typically won't acknowledge it because it's not going to be productive. And as psychologists, we know that that's usually what they're looking to get out of it is any kind of a reaction, really. Instagram also has this great feature where you can restrict someone and it doesn't let them know that they've been restricted. But when they post a comment, they think that they posted a comment, but no one else sees it. And so they don't get the reaction. And so that's been a good tool too, just to help, because you don't want things to blow up and get out of hand. And again, that's another reason why I prefer to keep my identity secret too, is because, I want to be safe. And I think I want to feel safe expressing things in humor that might be a little controversial or might garner some discussion or, might be a little bit critical. Especially, I know I've made memes in the past that have been critical of admin and whatnot. And I get it. I have friends that are admin. My own my own mom was a special ed admin. So I certainly get it. But I think it's also helpful for others in the community to have that outlet because I think that's a huge source of frustration for us as well. And I think that we deserve a space to be able to vent that. So
I completely agree with you. And I think that's part of humor, right? Like you kind of get close to a line, but knowing like where is the line and that line is different for everybody. And so it is sad that you have to feel like you have to be anonymous for that reason, but I totally understand why. Especially like school psychology is such a small little community.
Yeah.
And any of the dangers online really in general with, like you said, there's going to be haters and negative people and people seeking to just like push buttons and start things no matter what platform you're on. I agree, like Instagram has been the safest platform because usually the people interacting with our content are other school psychologists
Right.
who are following us because they like our content and they enjoy it. TikTok, you need to be careful because it kind of spreads to other people and then people take things the wrong way. And, obviously, again, it's online. So it's not like one little meme that you post expresses your whole view on this whole topic in depth.
Yeah. And you want to be mindful of that can be a hard line too, to be mindful of just your professionalism, and you don't want school psychology to get a bad rep either. So that's important to keep in mind. So, there's a lot of things that, you have to consider when you're using humor sometimes. And yeah, that can be one of the more difficult parts of it.
Yeah, I think that's good for people to also know, like, it looks kind of easy from the outside, but it is a fun thing to do. But there are like kind of hidden challenges, whether it's like time constraints, a little bit of financial things that you put towards your account as well, and then dealing with some of the negativity.
Right.
But do you think it's worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. I love having this as a platform. And so to me, it's very much worth it.
Do you have any future plans for school psych me?
I don't, it's something I think about a lot is where else can I take this? And then of course, do I have the time to take it there? And what would that look like potentially? I'm not exactly sure. I've been wanting to delve a little bit more into video. I know I've talked with you and Educationally Select about potentially doing a live stream or something like that. So I think something like that might be fun as well. But, I'm open to suggestions. So if people have suggestions, I'm more than willing to consider them.
What would you say your favorite work is to do as a school psychologist? Are you more of like a testing psychologist, a counseling, like behavior, or do you like everything?
I think I like everything, but it's hard for me to task switch, as fellow psychologists know, me with ADHD. When I started school psychology, I did a ton of counseling, especially my first 2 years, and I really enjoyed that. Now it's kind of evolved into me doing mostly testing and evaluations, and I really enjoy that too. I love the evaluation process. I haven't done a whole lot of counseling, and I've find that I would enjoy doing it again, but it's hard for me to balance the commitment that comes with counseling versus the deadlines that I have to meet doing evaluations. And so my caseload has gotten so high doing the testing that even though I would like to do some more counseling, I feel hesitant to commit to that because, what if I get 10 more evaluations? I'm going to need that, every little bit of time to complete those. So
Certainly. Well, and that is, I think, a big part of our job is like you have to task switch so often, especially if you're in a school that has a lot of behavior needs or counseling needs or like people coming into your office. So like how, as a person with ADHD, how do you manage that?
So I think what helps me a lot is I tend to, I don't know what the term would be, group things together or cluster things together. So I find that what I'll do is if I have, say, 15 or 20 evaluations open, I'll take a week and I'll just be like, all right, I'm doing all the tests this week, or I'm doing all the achievement testing this week. And then the week after that is, okay, this week, I'm just taking care of all the just secretarial, sending out forms, sending out rating scales, things like that. Another day or another week, I might be, okay, this is just going to be report writing day. So I tend to break things down into, I don't know, themes, depending on what I need to get done. And so I'm not switching back and forth in any given day as much. I try to minimize that. So I just devote the day to certain types of tasks, and that seems to help me a lot.
And are you able to kind of like put a sign up on your door, like, please don't disturb? Do people respect that?
They that's an interesting question. I have an office at one school, and I'd say people respect it because it's kind of a hidden office, which helps a lot. I really appreciate that. My other school, I share a room with about 3 or 4 other people. So I know how that is too, and that can be difficult to get report writing done. But somehow I find time to get through things, whether it be just writing a little bit at a time or whatnot, or really just setting boundaries helps a lot too, so that I know I have time to complete everything I need to get done.
Yeah, I guess that saying of like, somehow it just gets done happens.
Yes. I still don't believe it every year.
Right. Yeah, every year, we all know that feeling, right? When you're drowning in assessments and you're like, I don't know if I can do this. How am I going to do this?
Yeah.
And you just find a way because you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
What is your favorite type of evaluation to do? Like, what eligibility area?
Oh, man. I've never thought about that.
I guess that could be kind of a weird question, like your favorite kind, but do you have one maybe that you feel like the most comfortable with, or that you enjoy like certain parts of it more than others?
I mean, I will say if it's an ADHD evaluation, that's kind of my bread and butter, because I am so, having it myself, it's something that I just feel like I'm very knowledgeable on it, and I get passionate about it. And so I really do kind of enjoy doing those evaluations. I think, I find something enjoyable about the kind of detective work you have to do with any type of disability, I think. But when it comes to ADHD, that's kind of my specialty. So I enjoy those.
And do you ever like share that to make connections with either like families or kids?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, that might even be my favorite part of those type of evaluations, because you get the chance to say, hey, a lot of times you'll have a parent they're just distraught, and they're so anxious or upset about this potential eligibility or diagnosis or this label and the implications of it. And I feel so much at ease being able to talk to them and be like, look, this is what I have, and I know how hard this can be, but I also know how successful your kid can be as well. This is not a thing that has to be a bad thing necessarily. So I like trying to bring parents over to the more hopeful perspective on things, because I know it from my own personal experience. I think that they really appreciate that.
I bet, certainly, especially seeing someone, which we know, obviously, there's tons of super ultra successful people that have ADHD. But like in that moment as a parent, like see, hey, the person the professional who evaluated my child for this has this themselves. Like,
right.
It can be okay.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, in the moment, they might be feeling kind of distraught, especially, I think, in the settings that you're working in when they're really young versus like at the high school, they've kind of seen like, oh, okay, this played out all right. But my child's okay.
Yeah.
You're probably able to give some really good recommendations, too, because you understand it from, a deeper perspective than a school psychologist who doesn't have ADHD.
Yeah. Every school psychologist certainly has their areas of expertise. And it's one of those professions where we really kind of are a jack of all trades. I think sometimes we get to feeling guilty if we don't feel like we're super competent in one area, or we're not, the best in this broad range of skills that we supposedly are supposed to have. So, that's normal. I think it's okay to just say, that's an area that I'm not as comfortable with, or I'm not as skilled with, versus an area where I am skilled at. And, it's a lifelong learning process, and it's something that you have to keep doing as a psychologist, and you shouldn't feel bad about not being super skilled in a certain area.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we're expected to know so much and be experts in so many different fields. Like, there's no way to be an expert in like every single part of our job that we're supposed to know about. And I don't think people other than school psychologists even realize how much knowledge in so many different areas we're, quote, supposed to have and have been trained in. But yeah, I mean, that's what makes every psychologist different, right? Not just their personality, but like what their bread and butter is, what their favorite thing to do is, what they're like more experienced in, and you go down that rabbit hole and you still help all the kids, but you might have your cases that your heartstrings a little bit more for.
Or I still Google things, on the job. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, things are constantly evolving and changing. So it's, one way to stay on top of things. I don't think you can get around Googling things nowadays. Like, you got to use your resources. So,
right. Absolutely.
do you ever experience imposter syndrome? Is that something you experienced in the past?
Oh God, all the time. All the time. I mean, there's some days are better than others, certainly. But yeah, I do find myself, just sitting in a meeting or whatnot and thinking like, God, I'm the expert? Really? Like, I don't know about that. I think we all have those self-doubt moments. Yeah, I definitely have the imposter syndrome thing going on. And especially at the beginning of the year too. I feel like there's always like that first month back at school after having the summer off where I'm just figuring out what my job is.
Right. That brain fog. You're like,
oh my gosh,
what are my passwords? What do I do again? How do I?
Yeah, it's so bad. Yeah.
Yeah. But I wouldn't trade it for the summer, but I totally recognize that feeling too. I think everyone does. I've seen some memes about forgetting your passwords for sure.
Oh yeah. You don't even get me started on Q Interactive and Pearson.
Oh my gosh. I know the amount of times they make you change your passwords. I'm like, is this really like, do we need that? Yes, we need security around this is sensitive information, but like, are there really that many people trying to hack to find out these kids like answers to their BASC or whatever it is?
Yeah. I don't have any passwords left in me, I think is the meme. I have none left.
Well, I think people just start adding numbers to the end of their passwords. It's like, I can't keep doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is not sponsored in any way, but have you heard of LastPass?
I have not.
Okay, so it is like a central online like digital password storage website. And so it will automatically like fill things out, but there's like one master password that you have. And then you don't have to remember all your other passwords. So on your phone, like it just, scans your face and then it'll auto-populate your passwords. On your computer, like you just log in with your master password and it'll automatically log in for you. I never use that for work, but I use it in my personal life. And it's such a relief not to have to remember the millions of passwords we have.
That's a great suggestion there. You said it was called LastPass?
Yeah. So I guess maybe like your last password that you'll ever have to use. I just realized that. But yeah, it's called LastPass, and I think they have a free version. It's been a lifesaver. It'll even like generate passwords for you that are super secure. So there's no way you're going to remember it, but it'll automatically fill it for you.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do a quick fire. Would you rather do A or B? And then we could talk about it a little more too, okay? Okay, so would you rather do assessments or counseling?
Assessments.
FBAs or BIPs?
FBAs.
Why?
Well, so the thing about BIPs, I always say this when we're making them because they can be so frustrating. I think writing a good BIP is actually probably pretty easy, but it's the logistics of implementing it. As we're writing it, it's so easy to just pull things out of the air and be like, oh, this would be great. And, let's just put a 1-on-1 aid here. But then, you get the pushback. It's just, oh, well, we can't do that because, and this person's not available. And, so it gets really frustrating writing the behavior plan, even though it should be easy. I mean, we should know what the kid needs. So that's why I chose FBA. It's a little less frustrating up front.
Hey, as you're saying that, I'm like, yes, I totally agree with school psych memes there because that's so true. Like BIPs they're easy and feasible on a theoretical level,
yes,
but the actual implementation of it often is very tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And we often get a lot of pushback from other educators about it. Like, this isn't feasible. And it's like, okay, well, that's the hard part about being the school psychologist and professional or expert in like certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Is you have all these recommendations like, okay, well, this is what will help. But then they're like, well, we can't do that. It's like, well, then,
yeah,
okay, I guess we're going to figure this out one way or another, but it's not going to be perfect.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the challenging part.
Yeah. Okay, would you rather report write like in a quiet setting or do you like to play music?
You know what? What I started doing last year is playing music, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll play like movie soundtracks, like really, I don't know. I think the name of the group is Two Steps from Hell or something like that, which sounds really bad, but they just make these like really epic sounding movie soundtracks. And for me, I hear the epic music and I'm just like, all right, I'm writing this report, and it just makes me feel really important and like I'm on a mission. So, that's been helpful. I do that. I also do. I'm lucky I have a projector in my office, and there's I don't know the proper term for it, but there's a lot of YouTube channels right now where it's like 10 hours of a peaceful scene, and it's slightly animated, and they have maybe just nature sounds in the background or some kind of music. And I'll throw that up on the projector and just create a really kind of peaceful environment. And that really helps when it comes to writing reports too. So
That's nice. I bet that's a nice ambiance to be in. So, okay, so you don't particularly like complete silence. You like something, but nothing too distracting, just like calming,
right.
relaxing, or motivating.
Or motivating. Yep.
Yeah. Have you heard, I'm sure you have, like, I think some of the songs from Interstellar, that movie.
Oh, yeah.
I forget. I'm like, oh, this pump, like, yeah, you feel like you're doing something great.
Hans Zimmer, one of my favorites.
Yes, him. I'm so bad with names. Okay. What would you say, and we'll keep it to elementary school level, is your favorite IQ test? Like if you had to pick one to give, which one? I'm not saying one for all kids, but which one do you enjoy the most?
Oh, gosh. You know what? I wish I could give a quick answer to that. I'll say I give the whisk 90% of the time, but I think that's partially because it's so easy for me to give. I've given it 1,000 times, probably more than 1,000 times, I'm sure. And so it's kind of just my go-to. But I really also, I like some of the nonverbal IQ tests as well. I feel like they're a little less biased. So things like the Tony, I enjoy giving that, or the C-Tony. They're really simple to administer, but I think that they provide a lot of just baseline information, I think.
Yeah. No, I think especially, again, like in our job with the amount of cases we have, we want to spend more time evaluating the data and like figuring out what the problem is than like dealing with a wonky or difficult test. Like it's easier to just pull tests that we're really comfortable with and give those and focus more on the report and the kid, and not like, how do I administer this and all the different moving pieces?
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of opinions about IQ tests out there too. I don't typically place a lot of weight on it either. So, there's that as well.
Yeah, and it depends on the kind of evaluation you're doing, right? Like, let's say your OHI evaluations, they don't really play that big of a role. It's more just like, can I determine that you have, you're at least, not in the ID range, you have some typical level. There's not something else going on here. Does your state use all three methods of SLD identification?
We use response intervention, MTSS. So it's all based off of their progress with a evidence-based intervention. So,
well, I think that's probably the most ideal one in terms of like trying to help students.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think, the most complicated when it really comes down to like all the moving pieces involved with that type of evaluation. But I think it's the one I have the most confidence in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the one that I don't know, I feel like the best about in terms of like, we're trying to help this kid out. Like, do they need this special education? But yes, like you said, the most complicated, definitely not the most perfect. None of them are perfect in any way by any means.
Absolutely not.
But you might get the least amount. Well, I don't know. You might get more pushback with RTI too, because you're going back and saying, no, they need more intervention. They're like, we already tried that. I don't know. Is that the case?
Well, that's the interesting thing about specific learning disability identification. It's something that I don't think is talked about enough, is that there really isn't a good way to identify it. There's these different methods depending where you go. And I see that a lot of times in the private practice world too, where a student might get a diagnosis, and certainly they're entitled to that diagnosis, and doctors and professionals outside the school setting are qualified to give them. But at the same time, there's so many times in meetings where I just want to be like, look, like this isn't an exact science, but they don't talk about that. There's a lot of methods of identifying specific learning disabilities out there, but there's no one test that's going to give you the absolute answer.
Yeah, it's not a blood test, and it's a difficult conversation to explain to a parent. One, because obviously they're just concerned about their kid and they just want them to get help. They don't really care, like, the laws behind it, like, just give my kid more help.
Right.
But also, it's strange to say, especially as a professional, as a school psychologist, hey, our field actually doesn't really know how to identify this.
Mm-hmm.
This is just what the law says. And these are the best tools we have right now. And we can only go off of these tools. Like, you don't really
Right.
want to say it like that. But as school psychologists who have that deeper expertise and training, we understand what that means. We're not taking it at the like face value. Oh, so anyone can just identify this. It doesn't matter. Like, no, we have tools, but they're not perfect. This is all theory still, really.
Right. And there's a lot of ruling out other things that goes into it as well.
Right. So it's like, on one hand, it's very complicated and you need a lot of training to understand it. But on the other hand, there's still a lot of room to grow.
Yeah. And I think that's why, at least in Illinois, I'm not sure if this is true in other states, that SLD is the one eligibility where the entire team has to agree on it, more or less. Essentially, everyone has to sign that they either agree or disagree with that particular eligibility. And that's something that you don't get with any of the other ones.
That might be Illinois or district specific, because I've been in California and Virginia, and I haven't had that like for one category, but that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, didn't mean to make this an SLD conversation. If anyone is interested,
okay.
I do have a podcast episode on SLD where I try not to bash too hard, but I talk about all the issues with the different methods and kind of go into a deeper conversation about that. All right. Are you type A, type B person, or what would you categorize yourself as?
I think I'm essentially a type B person, but I become type A out of necessity, especially on the job. I think anxiety turns me into a type A at some point. Well, I just think about like growing up with ADHD, obviously, and just my journey through higher education to get to where I am now. And, a lot of it's just strategies that I had to adopt and take on because I knew that if I didn't, things were going to fall apart. I have to have things planned out. I have to be organized to a certain extent. I have to have my systems that work for me, but they certainly don't come naturally. It's not something that I do naturally. I have to put effort into staying organized and being able to plan ahead. And I still make mistakes.
You're human.
Yeah, like anyone else. But I think I'm more naturally type B, but I become type A out of necessity.
Yeah. I think that's another really good thing for people, especially new psychologists or grad students, to hear about is like, you don't have to be type A to be successful as a school psychologist. Yes, there are a ton of deadlines and, task switching and managing, but like you can be complete opposite of type A and you'll still figure it out. Like you said, you just need to have some systems in place. Mm-hmm. You're generally anonymous as school psych memes. That's like your alias online. Does anyone know who you actually are? Do your coworkers know that you run that account?
Yeah, I'd say that my closest coworkers certainly know that. It's not a complete secret by any means, but there's also a lot of people that don't, and even people that I went to grad school with that I'm friends with don't know. And I think that's kind of fun. I actually, I was at a party I think about a year ago, and there was a social worker at this party, completely different school district. And we got to talking, and the topic came up about memes or something like that. And I think she showed me one of my own memes. And I was like, oh, that's actually, I made that meme. And
oh my gosh.
She was like, wait, yeah. So you find people, and it's interesting finding out that people recognize your memes and that you end up then meeting them through other channels and things like that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, have you ever had people, whether in person or online, like forward you your own memes? Mm-hmm. Like, that must be such a surreal but like funny experience.
Yeah, even one of my best friends has a cousin who's a school psychologist, and of course they're friends on Instagram, and she was talking to him and being like, wait, because he's a surgeon, so he has no reason to follow school psych memes. So she was like, wait, why do you follow this account? She's like, oh, actually, that's my friend.
That's funny. What would you say is your least favorite part of being a school psychologist?
I'm thinking of two things, and probably the same two things that just about any other school psychologist would say. One being just like the extra paperwork / secretary type stuff. I just spend so much time sending out forms and scheduling things and, all those little just clerical tasks. I hate that.
All right, guys, I've got some great news for you. If you're looking to be an efficient and organized school psychologist, School Psych Finds has you covered. I have ready-to-use forms and an organization course that's tailored specifically to school psychologists, so you can spend less time dealing with the administrative part of our job and figuring out how to stay organized and manage all your paperwork, and more time doing what you love, like connecting with your students. I'll leave all the details to the course and the forms in the show notes.
My least favorite is sending outside rating scales back to doctors. Somehow that's been deemed my responsibility, is when a private physician has a teacher fill out a rating scale, I have to send the rating scale back to them. But it has to be either through mail or through fax, because fax is ironically the most secure form. It doesn't violate HIPAA laws and whatnot. So I end up having to take a lot of time doing that, and then they don't always provide the consent for me to do it. So I got to get the consent, and then I have to send it. And then, a month goes by, and then I hear that they never received it. And then the parent's upset. So I hate that. I hate that. And then the other, I think, part just in general that I don't like is just dealing with the contentiousness. When things get contentious with parents and there's just anger and frustration with the team. And, I don't like that. I'm naturally a very positive person, and I always want to see the best in a given situation. And, I'm always trying my best to do the best that I can. And so it's hard when you spend a lot of time just dealing with angry people and putting out fires, and just in general, that whole vibe, if you will. I don't enjoy that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think we all can resonate with that as well. And so I think, again, going back to tying this all together, wrapping this up, is like the appreciation that there is for your account, and that you're creating humor and like lightening this up a bit, because we do really need that. This is a wonderful job, but it's a really can be emotionally draining and tiring with there's increasing amounts of contention. So I really appreciate that you're taking the time out of, that hectic task switching schedule all day to create this content for everyone.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm going to continue doing it as long as I'm able to.
Where can people reach out to you? On Instagram, email? What do you prefer?
I want to say Instagram, but then I just get flooded with a lot of messages, so sometimes that can be difficult. I also, believe it or not, I also have a TikTok account, so you can find me on TikTok. There's not a whole lot of content on there because TikTok's just a different beast. So there's that. I do also have a professional email account. It's school.psych.memes@gmail.com.
Okay, we'll put that all in the description of the show if people want to reach out, but they just need to keep in mind that reaching out, you get a lot of messages, you want to reply, but it's a little hard, especially with all the task switching.
Yeah, so I do my best.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. This was really fun, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Well, I appreciate it. We'll see you on Instagram.
Thanks for tuning in to the School Psych Finds podcast. Join our community by subscribing and following me on my other channels, which can be found in the show notes. Lastly, if you enjoyed the podcast, it makes a huge difference if you leave a quick review. I'll see you all soon for our next School Psych Finds.